Tjena tjena.
Tjena tjena.
Here with Jree from Alternate. I'm going to do one of my grilled interviews with him. The strange thing is, most of the LCS players, like the ones that people know of, they have a really long history in League of Legends. Some of them played in like Season 1, some of them even played in tournaments in like 2010. But actually, we don't really see you on the scene until like the latter end of 2012. So before like you subbed in for Krepo with CLG and stuff like that, before that period, what were you doing? Were you just playing in mixed teams? Were you playing on soloq? Like, were you actually trying to be a pro before then?
Yeah, before that, I played a lot of soloq. And at the end of Season 2, I reached like 2.5k elo. But even before that, I was playing with a team with some high elo players.
Any that we'd know?
Hypothetical, Arfana.
Okay.
Yeah. And we didn't really win anything, but so yeah. Yeah, that's basically it.
So the first place most people will have heard of your name was when you got to sub in for CLG, because at the time CLG.EU was a very famous name and they'd had some good results. How did you actually get that opportunity?
Well, there's a funny story. Like, they posted on Reddit that they need a support, and I was like trollish, writing. I got 2.5k elo and I dropped out of school.
Okay. You actually said you dropped out?
Yeah, because at that time the joke about drop out of school was going like.
Okay, yeah.
So I said that I just drop out of school and I have 2.5k elo and you can pick me, whatever. But it wasn't really that got me into the team. It was more like Hypothetical that I played with before. He knows Frog in real life.
Okay.
So yeah, it was basically from that.
That's actually quite interesting though, because what made that result so significant, the MLG, wasn't just that you guys finished third, which is a really good placing, but the fact that when people think of that CLG.EU team, they were so famous for like having a very distinct style. They were the only ones who played this really long stall out style, and people always think of that team a bit like the old Gambit lineup as like a team where you couldn't remove anyone from that team. You know, it's better as like a unit of those five, and that five has to be there to be that good. Yet they put you in, a player who in theory has a totally different style to Krepo, and you managed to come third. Like, how do you think that's possible? Did you think the same thing before you joined, that the team had such a weird style compared to yours?
Well, I just adapted their style. And they told me before the event that you have no pressure on you or anything, because we had all a long break before the event, and so whatever place we get here is just a bonus. And so we end up third place with basically no training at all together. I only do with yellowpete before the event, so it was really good for us, or for me at least. Like, first time being at the event and do so good, so it boosts my confidence as well in playing and keep on trying to go pro after that.
So like I said, they had a very famous style, the stall out style. When you actually played in the team, did you just try to copy what Krepo had done, the champion C played before? Like, how did you adapt exactly?
I just played the OP champ like Sona at that time. Okay. And well, I basically listen what they said. So if they say like, let's go Drake, I just follow what they are telling me. So I didn't really do any extraordinary flashy plays or anything. So I just played safe, and yeah, that was basically it.
Okay. So in that case, when you were playing, would you actually think to yourself like, oh, I should play more passive than I usually do?
Well, the first game was like that, but after that I just focused on my own game and played. It was nothing really special overall.
Another thing that was very strange about that particular MLG is like the way the tournament started, it looked like actually it was going to be really bad because you guys lost to Dignitas, and then you had this scenario where because you arrived late for the lower bracket, you were one game down, so it looks like, oh, they're actually going to go out really early, but then you just rampaged through everyone. You even beat like TSM, CLG. Like, what were you actually thinking yourselves early on, like this experiment hasn't worked after you lost to Dignitas?
Well, it's hard for me to tell what the other thing.
What were you thinking at the time?
Well, when we lost to Dignitas, it was like 3 in the morning.
Okay.
And or something like that, really late. And and we had to be at the event at like 10 the next day to play against the coast. I think it's the current coast team.
Yeah, Team Dynamic.
Yeah. And I think some people came late, and we got 1 game less. And from that we just said that we can win this. It doesn't matter. Like, we're still a great team, and we're just gonna show that we can win. So from that, I think we got a good moral boost as a team, and just rampage through the loser bracket.
So those two teams you beat, TSM, at the time they were like dominating NA tournaments. They were winning all the MLGs and stuff before that. And after that, CLG NA, the team with like Doublelift, all these famous players, these were all thought to be like top international teams. For you personally, you'd never had experience against that sort of international teams. Did it just come easily when you got in there? Like once you got in the games, you could just play as usual? Was there any like learning curve to playing these top teams?
Well, I scrimmed some of the like TSM online or something like that, but it's not the same as playing in an offline event. But once you're in the box, like MLG has soundproof box, and once you're in there, is just focus on the game, nothing special at all.
If I think of a lot of players in esports, so even in other games that I've followed, usually what happens is there's like a gradual growth of like how a player's career goes. Okay, so he has to become like good in his country, then he has to become good in Europe, and usually it's by like getting experience. So he plays the best teams in his country, the best teams in Europe. But then when people go to their first international tournament, usually it's like accepted that you'll probably not do very well. You'll probably fail. Maybe you'll be like a lot of pressure, or you'll be starstruck by seeing these players you've never seen before. Was it really just never the case for you? You were always just comfortable even playing these very famous players? I mean, you must have known people like Doublelift, all these names.
Yeah, of course I knew who I was playing against, and the first game against Dignitas, I was really nervous. And I think after that, when we won the second game against Dignitas, the whole pressure thing for me just released, and it was, for me, playing like any other game, like playing from home. So, yeah.
What about then when you played against Blaze, who actually won the whole tournament? And this was your first experience playing Koreans, and nowadays we all know like the reputation of Koreans is that they're like the absolute best. From the game you played there against them, were they like everything they were hyped up to be?
At that time, yes. Like we tried to avoid their early aggression that they did against us, and we had no response at all to it. Like 2 games in a row, we got stomped really hard. So yeah, they were really good, and are really good at the moment as well.
Was there anything about their specific players that impressed you or stood out from the players you're used to playing in the bottom lane? What was anything interesting about the Koreans?
Just their play style. Like at that time, they played really aggressive against us, because the new Snoopy is like a really passive jungle, and they like abused it really hard in a good way for them, so they could just snowball the game really easy, and they didn't do any mistakes at all in the game. So yeah.
So after that, you had these couple of events where, okay, so there's this one event, Dreamhack Winter, where you went with like a mixed team of other Swedish players, and you actually managed to get to the semi-finals. And the thing is, people won't remember now, because the teams that you beat Acer, okay, in the group stage, and now people will be like, who? Because they weren't relevant. Yeah. But at the time, people thought, oh, they'll probably make the semi-finals, when they looked at the groups, and they had like Citizen Wayne, who was like a famous player. Was this like a big result?
Yeah, it was like after Dallas, then people were like, yeah, now we won't see this guy anymore. And then I just pick 4 random people, and we get to semi-finals in Dreamhack. So it was like fun and really good, and you can show that you have potential in the scene as well. And yeah.
In that tournament, obviously you got to play against CLG in the in the group stage you played them, and now in LCS you get to play against them as EG. It'll sound like a cliched question, but did actually playing in CLG, since they had that one style they were so famous for that tournament, does that give you any special insight, do you think, when you face them now? Like, do you have a better sense than maybe some other players do?
No, not really. No? Because I mean, we play one tournament, but in the next tournament the game is changing all the time, so it's not like you can take advantage of it or anything.
Okay. Well, from playing with yellowpete in the bottom lane and playing against him and seeing how he is to play against him, how would you describe him as a bot laner? Like, what are his strengths? Like, how does he like to play, do you think?
He's like a really passive laner, and it's not a bad thing at all, because he's like he go for the CS instead of the trade, you can say. And he's a really good mechanical player.
So actually, people now when this interview comes out, will have seen out this season of LCS. Your team has been doing very well, and you qualified for this season, and you've been like one of the top teams. But your team was actually also, a lot of people thought you were going to qualify for the spring season before you had Creaton, when you just got Air. And it was kind of one of the shocks that not only did you guys not qualify, but you didn't actually get out of the group when you were in there. You didn't even get to like the round of 8 part. Like, what happened for you guys at that qualifier? Like, did you yourself think like we're a favourite coming into it?
We had Fnatic in our group and Giants, and the first game were against Giants, and we played this poke comp, and we did not that good and not that bad either, but they had this Rice. He was so fed, so he could just snowball the game alone and won the game alone. And the next game, because it was like loser winner bracket in the group stage, we were against Annexis, which we won pretty easy. And then we had to face Fnatic in the last group stage match, and we were actually ahead like all game until we won Baron call, I think, and we threw the whole game away. And after that, it was like really depressing for us, because we knew that we had a really good chance to get into LCS at that point. So yeah.
One of the interesting things was, I noticed around that time, a lot of the teams who, like your team, were considered like a favourite to get through. So I'm thinking of teams like Millennium, but a famous example would be a Millennium for this question, in the sense that because they didn't qualify, even though they had good teams, by the time the next qualifier had come around, they'd split up and people had gone to this team, and they'd changed players. And so people would have thought with your team, with like Alternate being a famous name in German esports, like they'll probably have a new lineup by the time the next qualifier comes around. But actually you sort of kept the same lineup. Like you gradually brought in like Creaton, like after you'd qualified the next time, basically. It was a similar sort of lineup. Was it really just the plan, even as soon as you failed the first qualifier for the spring, like let's just keep the same lineup and just play the amateur season and we're going to qualify next time? Was there never any thoughts about trying a new lineup, or you maybe going to another team?
After when we lost, we just went to the hotel and talked about what we're going to do next, and everyone agreed that we should stick together and qualify for the next season. So yeah, so it was never any thoughts about leaving the team or anything. So we all had the same goal, and was to get into LCS, and now we're here. So yeah.
Without mentioning any names, after you had the good tournament with CLG when you were in MLG, and then later on, maybe even after this qualifier, maybe, are you someone who has gotten like good offers from bigger name teams?
No, not really.
No?
No.
Okay. Did you expect to after the MLG, etc.?
No, not. I mean, before the MLG, I was gonna join Alternate anyways.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah.
Okay. So, to get into this season of LCS, it's almost like poetic that you had to play Giants again, because they're sort of one of the teams that screwed you over the last time, and even then it was like super close series. Do you think the fact that you knew them so well is what made the series so close? Why was it such a close series? Because if we look at you in LCS this season, you're doing so well. Last season they were doing really badly. So how were the teams so close at the beginning?
We didn't really have a great synergy with Creaton at that time. And and I think that was the key for the first 2 games when we lost. We didn't really trust each other, and then the third game we just went nuts. Like Krepo and Shen, he was like, I will go in no matter what. And I think we got a really good moral boost after the third game. Yeah, and after the third game we got a really good moral boost, and could just snowball the 2 last games from that, even though the last game was pretty bad again for us. But then the 3k yellow shockwave and Doublelift came out, so yeah.
When you guys got Creaton into the lineup, like I know a lot of the European players who are high elo, etc., have played each other lots on soloq, and also there's so many online cops in Europe in 2012 that every team's played each other a bit. Like, how actually familiar were you already with Creaton as an AD carry from playing against him? Like, are you played against him much in 2012? Had you watched him in CLG.EU? Like, how familiar really were you before he joined Ultimate?
Well, I knew who he was, but I never played with him, like not even in soloq, I think. I never played with him, but yeah.
What was your impression of him before playing with him, and has it changed at all now that you've had a chance to play lots of games in the same lane?
Well, our team knew he was like one of the best AD carries at that time when we picked him up, so for me it was just to adapt to his playstyle, basically, yeah.
About him as an AD carry, okay, because he actually used to play for Team Acer, and that's the site I work for, Team Acer. And so I actually knew about him quite a while ago. And even at that time, people were saying like he was the best player in that team, and he was like a really good AD carry. And then when he was in Curse and they beat M5, that was like a big result. And then after that, like I said, Millennium were actually a favorite to get into the last LCS season. And so a lot of people, he's had a lot of chances to potentially like break through and become known as like a star player. But it wasn't until this season of LCS where before he had his injury, people were like, wow, this guy's like the best player in LCS, etc. Europe is so famous. Everyone says around the world, all the regions, like Europe doesn't have very many AD carries, they say, who are good. You know, they always say like they're quite passive or they're not very strong. Is he different to other AD carries in this sense?
Yeah, he's really aggressive. Like maybe not in lane, but when it comes to team fight, he's the one doing the calls like go, 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 no matter what. When he's playing Ezreal, he's using E aggressive. He's on Vayne, he go all in with his ult and Q and stealth into 5 people or something like that. So it's like a really crazy playstyle, and I think it fits us as a team really well.
In terms of when you're playing with them and you're thinking of your own synergy in the bot lane, sometimes you have teams. So I'm thinking, for example, of like the old Gambit bot lane. So in their bot lane, they had Genja like to play really, really passive, but Edward liked to play really, really aggressive. And it was sort of like the two of them balancing that out together that made them a really good bot lane. Okay, so when you play with Creaton and he's going really aggressive and he's trying to get kills all the time, are you a player who just goes along with him and you're really aggressive as well, or are you trying to tell him when to play passive? Like what's the actual like relationship like there?
It's hard to tell, but you should always try to focus together. Like if he go aggressive, you go aggressive. If he go passive, I go passive. So I think yeah, that's pretty much it. You need to know how to play with each other and know how the other guy think. And when he does something, you need to do it as well at the same time. So yeah.
With some other bot lanes as well, I've seen that sometimes if the AD carry is the star player, then a lot of the time he's the one who decides when the bot lane does something. Okay, like I'm going to attack now, you know, you come with me. But sometimes when the support is considered a star player, so people like MadLife, these sorts of people, it sounds like it's the opposite with them. They decide, like they tell the AD like move in now and get the kill, I'm going to like harass this guy or something. What's it like in your bot lane? Is there like a hierarchy there? Does one of you tend to tell the other one what to do? Like how does it work?
Well, we both gives like ideas on what to do, but when it comes to like the final call, it's usually him doing it.
Okay. And is that different from any of the other bot lanes you've played in the past, or are you always been comfortable with that style?
For me, it's always been like that. The AD carry does the call, so I'm used to it.
A lot of whenever I see people talking about the support players in the different regions around the world, people always talk about the Koreans because first of all they have MadLife, who's so famous, but then they also have some other supports who are very, very good. And the thing people always tend to focus on and what a great support player should do is they always say like vision control and like how they ward. Like how would you rate yourself on this level? Like how good is your vision control, how good is your warding, etc., and like checking the enemies?
It's really hard to tell like that, but I mean LCS I should be top 8 in Europe at least.
Are you actually someone who's watched much OGN? Like, have you watched much of MadLife play?
I watch them sometimes. Now when the playoffs is, I watch every game.
Okay. What do you think of MadLife as a player? When people say, okay, so when people are describing different positions, even if you say someone's the best top laner, the guy who's the second best is probably also quite close, you know. But when people talk about MadLife, they talk about him like he's up here and then everyone else is like down here, you know. Is that overrating it? Is he really that good?
No, I think it's really good. Like when you see him play Thresh, he's like hitting every hook he does, and he got great positioning and he helps his team like a lot. So I think he's the best, of course, and but maybe it's the second best is not so far away as everyone else think.
So when people talk about MadLife, one of the things I read that was an unusual fact is that supposedly he like memorizes and has written down every cooldown for all the different effects, etc., so that when they're attacking the enemy, he can get his team to attack just when the cooldown finishes, you know, on the enemies. Is this really something that like all pro players who are playing the bot lane are trying to do anyway? Does it just sound better on paper than it is, or is this something that like you think no one else is doing?
I mean, you know about how long every spell in League of Legends, how long cooldown it is, so if you know that he missed a hook on Blitzcrank or whatever, you have around 15-16 seconds, you can do whatever you want in lane. So yeah, I mean, you know about how long cooldown every spell is and you can take advantage of that.
Okay. I asked you before we did the interview, like if you watched some of the other regions, and you mentioned you sometimes watch NA, the LCS NA. We don't really hear that much about the supports actually from NA. They're not really the players who get mentioned very much. Who are the supports in NA who are like either you like to watch because of their style or you think are good? Who comes to mind immediately when I say that?
Well, basically Edward, because he's from Europe as well, but from that you have Xpecial, that's really good, and also Chauster. And LemonNation now as well when he's in C9. So yeah.
Okay, let me ask about a few of them then. So let's start with Edward actually, because obviously he used to be in Europe for a long time, and initially it would have been very hard for people to know actually how good is Edward, because they only knew him in the Gambit lineup. And when someone's part of one lineup, you never really can tell how good they are until they play with someone else, you know. Has him playing in Curse changed your view on how good he is or what he does at all?
I think he at the start he didn't really do that great, but because of the language barrier as well and the new playstyle. But I think he adapted really well now, and he's doing really good again.
What would you describe as his strengths as a support?
He's really aggressive, and he really likes to do plays. So if you play Blitzcrank, he will go for the flash grab. If you play Zona, he will go for the flash ultimate. So yeah, so he's like a really aggressive player in that sense.
When you look at other support players, from interviewing lots of players in different esports games, I've found that a lot of really good pro players, they tend to like the other pros who have the skills that they don't. So that's why they think, like for example, if they're very, very smart, they'll look at a player with really good aim and be like, oh, he's so amazing, because they know that that's the one thing they don't have, so it seems special to them. Whereas being smart seems like, well, I already have that, so it seems easier, you know. And vice versa, you know, the player who's very smart will be like, oh, I wish I had the positioning of that guy or something. And it's kind of like, if you think about like, okay, so when girls get their hair done, the one who has the curly hair always is straightening it. She wants the straight hair. The one who has the straight hair is using curlers to tie. This same thing usually happens. So when you think of other supports that you like to watch or ones that you try to learn from, do you like to watch players who have a similar style to you and you try to just improve there? Do you like to watch the ones that have a totally weird style, nothing like yours? What is it like for you?
I usually like to watch like aggressive players that do a lot of plays and and learn from that and take. So I can learn as well. Like if I see someone play Blitzcrank, I will see how he play, and then I will just copy it for myself and see if it works for me. And yeah.
You've mentioned Blitzcrank a few times. We talked about MadLife. So this champion, obviously, a bunch of months back was like so famous for like all these highlight videos people were making of him. But now a lot of people, it seems like they just abandon Blitzcrank because Thresh is sort of like a better version of Blitzcrank. It seems like. Here's the weird thing, okay, so even if someone's like MadLife and they play Thresh, it seems like you can't really ban that champion out because you can't really waste all your bans on the support player, you know. Do you think this is why like Thresh is so dominant as a support champion?
Yeah, but also because he was really strong. You get like free armor from your passive, you have a hook, you have your flay, which is like midi knock-up, and a slow, you have your shield, and so you can move your AD carry or something, and your ultimate is a 99% slow and deals ridiculous damage. So I think the champion overall is really strong, and not because of players banning other champions.
Okay. Can you see it? Do you think it'll eventually get nerfed in some way?
He's really Riot really nerfed him now. Like first they removed so he can't grab and flash, for example, and now they also reduced his base stats and his passive as well. So yeah, they try to make him like in the same level as the other support champions.
Comparable to
yeah.
Okay. So you mentioned before Xpecial, and obviously if you watch LCS NA, you must watch him a lot because his team does so well in NA. What are Xpecial's strengths? Like, how would you describe him? Like, if I asked you to be the scout, okay, and you were gonna like scout how TSM plays for my team, what would you tell me about Xpecial? What is he good at? What's he gonna try and do?
He's a really smart player. I mean, when he plays Thresh, for example, like one game against Curse, he just interrupt every Jarvan EQ combo, for example. But also his team fights are really good as well. So yeah, he's a really smart player that can take advantage of that.
So you also mentioned Chauster. He was most famous for support like earlier on 2012, and he only just came back to the support position. And early on, he was struggling. When you mention him as someone you like to watch, what do you actually think of him now? Like, has he gotten back to the level he was before? Like, what is he good at support?
Maybe it's not at the level he was before, but I think he's getting there. And because if you change role, he's like coming back to the old role. It's not the same as it was like half a year ago. It's a complete different role at the moment, so you need to adapt, and I think he's adapting really fast, and he's really good at support, so yeah.
Since you said you watch LCS NA, I've got a hypothetical question for you, like an imaginary one here. So one of the things that was interesting about Chauster coming back to the support position is when he was in support last year with CLG, okay, that's when they were like at their best in the bottom lane, and Doublelift looked really amazing in like season 2, and their bottom lane looked really scary. Then they tried Loco Doko, they tried Afromu as support players, and those players didn't do as well, and as a result, Doublelift's impact on the team seemed to be less. And we saw at the All-Star game when he played with Xpecial, he played really well again, and so it seems like having a certain type of support with him makes Doublelift's impact a lot more. Even if he plays really well, he doesn't necessarily have as much of an impact on the game unless he has the good support with him to make it work okay. So if I imagine we were going to put you with Doublelift, okay, and your aim here is just forget the rest of the team, you're just going to try and make the bottom lane like as strong as it can be. How should Jree play with Doublelift to make Doublelift the best he can be? What would you need to do? What types of play does he need, do you think, to be his best?
I think Doublelift has like one of the best mechanics in the whole game, but I think he like overall vision of the map, for example. Oh, okay. So I think you need to help him with looking out for where the players are, when you're getting ganked and stuff like that. So you need to help him with thinking, like, or what can I say? Okay. Like playing smart. You need to help him to play smart and just not go brainless and just die like all the time.
I mean, that kind of reminds me of when we were talking before about like how whether or not the support tells the AD what to do or the other way around. And it seems like a lot of people have mentioned that Doublelift's problem is sometimes that his individual skill is so amazing, but then his decision making can be really weird. Do you think he's a player who needs like the support to be telling him all the time when to go aggressive, when to do this, when to do that?
I don't think you have to tell him when to go aggressive. I just think you have to tell him like it's too much at the moment. You need to like back off and just play passive now, because we might get ganked or something like that. You need to tell him like what stuff is happening around him, so he can focus at what he's best at, and that is his mechanics. So yeah.
So the other one you mentioned was LemonNation, the guy for Cloud9. A lot of people wouldn't know him so much before this season because Cloud9 were kind of like a breakout team. The interesting thing about their bottom lane is that actually they even tried to replace their AD carry with Chaos, but he turned down the offer, and so they had this guy Sneaky instead. And he isn't necessarily thought to be like a very good AD, yet their team's at the top of the whole league, they're doing amazing. So it makes this LemonNation guy look even better as a support player. Like, what does he do that's interesting or unique? Like, is he different from other NA supports, do you think?
When he joined the LCS, he played with like heal, for example. That's not like a normal spell that anyone else uses. So he got a different playstyle. Like he plays Zyra a lot. He really likes to impact in team fights with his supports. Like he usually like Janna, Zyra, and Thresh, and all those are really strong in team fights. So yeah.
So before I got sidetracked with all that, when we were talking about Creaton, that's one of the X factors on this season that we'll always look back and think like, what if? Because up until the point where he got injured, you guys were something like, I think it was like 9-4 or something. You had like a really, really nice record. And even since he's come back, you've been winning games. You were like 12-6 at some point. So with him in the lineup, you were like maybe the best team in all of LCS. But then when he went out is exactly the time when it seemed like really, really close and your team couldn't pull away at all. It'll sound like really obvious to ask, like, if he'd have been in the team, would you be like the best team in LCS? But I mean, is there a reason to suggest that you would have been?
It's hard to tell. I mean, he didn't play, so you can't really say.
But I mean, what do you think the impact of having?
Yeah, I mean, he's like one of the biggest shot caller in our team in late game team fights.
Oh, okay.
Because we always like protect Creaton, and he's like always go on this target. So yeah, I mean, when we played with White Knight, he was not like a star player. Was
more like a role player.
Yeah, he was more like a team player, or playing for the team, and not be like selfish. Or what can I say? Like Creaton is. Yeah.
Some of the players in your team are obviously most famous for like being solo queue stars, and so the old unwritten rule of League of Legends used to go like this: if you just took like the 5 really most skilled solo queue players and put them all in one team, it'd never work. You know, you need to have like team play, and you need to have this guy who maybe his skills aren't as amazing, but he's a great team player, and this guy's very smart, and you have the one shot caller who tells everyone what, you know. These are all the things that we think of as how you set up a League of Legends team, and yet your team's been very successful. And you're saying here like different people do shot calling at different points in the game. Did it just literally, when you got this lineup together, did it just immediately click and it all just worked how it does now? Was there a plan in mind in how it would be set up?
Well, when I first joined Alternate, we played with Cottonex, and back then it was more like quiet all game. There was no one really doing shot calls or anything. But then when Aranea joined, we had someone that's doing calls for us in the early and mid game. He's saying go Drake, we go Drake. And he helps us with picks and ban and everything. And when Creaton joined, we also had someone to do late game calls. So I think when he joined, it was like it clicked like really fast together, like who's doing what in the game.
Because the lead-on question to that setup there of like having a team where it's not got like the one set shot caller and this style of having a lot of skilled players, just putting them together in a bunch and it just working. The downside people will say to that is that if we imagine your team goes to the Season 3 World Championship, okay, and you have to play like the best team from Korea, the best team from China, these are teams that in theory are very, very organized. You know, they know at all points in the game what they want to do and who's going to do what. Do you think that could be a weakness for your team, that you won't have the same level of organization in the lineup?
Maybe not, because it's our playstyle and it works for us on how we do it. So I don't think they will have any advantage or anything over us because of that. I don't think that.
Have you ever thought about having like one guy have the job and he's the only shot caller in the game, or will you just always stick with this method? Is there anything you ever tried or tried but didn't do or something?
I mean, we have Aranea's early game and mid game shot caller telling us, I will gank here, I will go for Drake and stuff like that, but I don't think it's needed, because everyone in the team is giving like advice, like should we go for Drake, but Aranea is the one taking the decision, you know, to it's like the final call, that what he says we do it. And I don't think it's a bad at all, because then the whole team is at the same level, because everyone is giving like points on what to do.
Actually, a question I should have asked earlier that I just remembered now. So when we were talking about different supports, an interesting one I figured to ask you about would be Krepo, because technically you got to sort of take his spot for a tournament, and then you've obviously played against him since. So when you play against Krepo, how would you describe him? And did playing in CLG at the time give you like a sense of what it must be like for him to play, or what kind of things he must have to do to make that team successful?
I think first of all, Krepo is like really good player, and yeah, he's like great mechanics, and he can play both aggressive and passive, so that's like a really good skill to have. And what was the second part of the question?
Like, what do you think from getting to play with CLG, so you played with yellowpete, you played with the other members of the team when they were in their most famous period, what do you think he has to do within his team to make them successful? Like what does Krepo need to do for his team to make them good?
The difference when I played with them, I was more like passive and just try to help them out, but I think Krepo is more like an aggressive player when he plays with them. He likes to play, when he play like Leona, he will go for the ultimate. He will, when he plays Zona, he might flash ultimate or something like that. And I think he likes to do plays. So yeah.
So another bottom lane that's worth mentioning from this season of LCS is obviously Gambit, because it was so famous for how good it was before when they had Edward, and now they've tried two different players at the bottom lane. They tried Darker and now this Voidal guy. they haven't had very much success this season compared to how great we remember Gambit and Moscow 5. What do you think the problem's been with their bottom lane? Because everyone now looks at it and thinks because Edward's not there, they blame Genja or they blame the new guy. What do you think the problems that they've had are overall just as a bottom lane?
I just think they didn't have time to get a great synergy together. Like Gambit, they travel like back and forth every week, so they may play like one day and then have to go back here. So I think that they lack like synergy together, and was the main part of their bot lane.
Okay, for my last question, I always like to do a hypothetical in these interviews. So for this one, aliens come to Earth. And the first thing they do, obviously, this is what you do for your aliens, is you set up a League of Legends match for the fate of the Earth. And if the humans can beat the aliens, then Earth survives. Otherwise, you just destroy Earth, okay? And so, for some reason, they pick you as the captain of Team Earth, okay? So you're going to be in this team that's going to play. But what they tell you is, they've heard from, other games that in Europe, the best players all come from Scandinavia. They've heard, like in Counter-Strike, Sweden, Denmark, these are all the best players. So what they tell you have to do is make your all-star team to play the aliens, but it has to be only Scandinavian players, and you're playing the support, and then I want someone for each of the other positions. It has to be like, obviously, the fate of the Earth, so you've got to pick like the best players here, but you can pick them from any Scandinavian country. Who would you want at each position, and give me a reason? So top lane,
top lane, I would choose... Holy shit. I would choose Wicked.
Wicked, okay.
Because he's experienced, can play a lot of champions. Yeah, that's pretty much it. He's experienced, and that's a great thing when it comes to one game and everything on the line.
Okay. Jungler?
For jungle, I would choose Svenskeren.
Svenskeren? Okay.
Yeah.
Over Cyanide and those guys, etc.?
No, I would still choose Svenskeren.
Oh, okay. Why?
He's a really good player, and I really like his champion pool with like Lee Sin, with Jarvan and stuff like that, and Nasus. And I think he's also experienced, so I think he can do really good.
So in that case, before we go to the others, I have to jump in there then. So you picked Svenskeren as the best Scandinavian, for your team at least, on this hypothetical. But at the same time, they already have a Scandinavian player in that team who replaced him, Meluno. So what reason do you have to put Svenskeren above all these other players? What makes...
Svenskeren, he basically stepped down. So if he would stay in the team, he would still be in the main roster. So, yeah.
Okay, so mid laner?
For mid lane, it's tough. But I think I will go with Bjergsen.
Bjergsen over Froggen?
Yeah, only because of Svenskeren and him having synergy together.
Okay.
So
a bit of a cheat answer.
Yeah, but that's basically it. Because both Froggen and Bjergsen are really good players, and yeah, that's basically it. Because they have synergy together with Svenskeren.
Okay, and then AD carry.
In AD carry, I would choose Reckless.
Reckless, okay.
Because he's Swedish.
Just because he's Swedish?
Yep.
Okay. So do you have any final words or someone you'd like to thank or say hello to?
Thanks for everyone supporting me. Thanks for Team Alternate and all the sponsors. Hello mom, hello dad.
Tack så mycket.
Tack så mycket.